Hello, welcome. My name is Molly Brody, and I am currently your Vice President. And for those of you who haven't been to an AAPOR conference before, AAPOR has a number of traditions that as a community we really hold dear. One of them is that the Vice President, me, has the honor to introduce the President before he or she gives the presidential address. So basically it means that it's my role and my responsibility to make sure that you get an inside look at the man who has been your president this past year. By the time I'm done, you should know Michael Link a little bit better as a person, as your AAPOR colleague, and as your leader. Now, I've been thinking a lot about that term, leader, this year. We have faced some difficult, challenging, and often serious issues as a community, as an industry, and certainly as a council. Things like working to understand how big data can best be utilized in the survey environment, addressing the growing use of non-probability panels in survey research and elections, an extensive and just a tad bit controversial review of our code of professional ethics, and let's not forget being publicly compared to the buggy whip manufacturers. Throughout all of this, running over and over in my head has been the lines from one of my favorite movie scenes delivered by another Michael Douglas, in the film The American President.
We've got serious problems, and we need serious people. And if you want to talk about character, Bob, you better come at me with more than a burning flag and a membership card. If you want to talk about character and American values, fine. Just tell me where and when, and I'll show up. This is a time for serious people, Bob, and your 15 minutes are up. My name is Andrew Shepard, and I am the president.
It was that line, "We've got serious problems and we need serious people," that kept swimming around and around in my head as I worked closely with Michael this year. We definitely need more serious people like our president, Michael Link, to deal with our serious problems. So let me just take a little time and tell you a little bit more about our very serious Michael. Like most of us, he was once a young boy. And like some of us, he used to perm his hair. That full head of curly hair, no, not natural. And I figured out where he gets his witty humor. It turns out that he's the long-lost twin of somebody else famous. Now, tomorrow night at the casino, come and find me, and I'll pay odds if you can guess which of these are pictures of Michael and which are pictures of Jim. Now, for those of us who are already lucky enough to know Michael well or to have worked with him closely, we recognize that he is pretty much outstanding at everything he does. He's an expert in methodology, a fabulous writer, a great teacher and mentor, a rock and roll genius drummer, formerly with the band Rubber Souls, named for the great 1965 Beatles album, and he is virtually a James Beard award-winning chef, a true diva in the kitchen, so I'm told. But it turns out that there was once just one thing that he wasn't so good at. He started his academic career as a biology major, and in his genetic lab class, it turned out that he had no ability to get his fruit flies to do whatever it is you're supposed to be able to get fruit flies to do when you're studying genetics. I am guessing that it had something to do with reproduction. Anyway, a lovely young woman, Tina, took pity on the poor young man, Michael, and helped him out with his fruit flies. And the rest, as they say, is history. First, there was true love with Tina. Then there were the Bam sisters, Brittany, Alex, and Madison, although they're standing in reverse order here, Madison, Alex, and Brittany. And to round out the incredible family that are here to cheer Michael on today are his parents, Bob and Sharon Link, seen here with Tina, the Bam sisters, Michael, and of course Piper and Scarlett, whose combined 8 legs weren't allowed into this hotel despite my many, many, many pleas. Altogether, these are truly the loves of his life. So, how did Michael get here today? Well, like many of us, Michael came to the survey research industry in a roundabout way. He got an assistantship at the University of South Carolina Survey Center as just a job to pay for his graduate school education in American government. He never guessed that that would open the door that would launch his entire career. He learned everything about doing surveys from the ground up from Dr. Bob, and while Dr. Bob's wife, Miss Rita, watched the BAM sisters so that Tina and Michael could both go to school and work. His career has been illustrious, diverse, and far-reaching. He's worked in every sector that we draw on as part of AAPOR community: government, academic, nonprofit, and commercial. His own research helps to develop new methodologies and the use of new technologies to confront some of our most vexing issues facing our country. And his AAPOR service has been truly remarkable. He's been our AAPOR conference chair twice. Who else can make that claim? He's been our counselor at large. He's led and participated in some of our most influential task forces. He reviews and writes papers for POQ, and he teaches us all through webinars and short courses. He has been actively engaged in our Southern chapter of SAPOR, and he is the winner, along with his colleagues, of one of our most prestigious awards, the AAPOR Warren J. Matosfi Innovators Award. But I hazard to guess that nothing has been quite as demanding, all-consuming, and perhaps as invigorating as the past 2 years that he has tirelessly served us as Vice President and President. To list all of his achievements and contributions would last too long, but I know that AAPOR 2025, our strategic vision, will remain one of his greatest legacies for our future. In leading that effort, he put his own strongly held beliefs into action, that leaders and organizations should have a vision of where they're headed, an articulated, actionable, and followable plan so that people know where they're going and how they can help get us there. He led that effort to do that for all of us with AAPOR 2025. Now let me just tell you a few more things about working with Michael. He is organized, he is inspiring, and he is brilliant. He is kind, and he has incredible integrity, and he is always on. Even with the 3 hours between my California home and his Georgia-based address, I would get emails both as I woke and as I headed off to sleep. This seemed like an even greater feat as he spent weeks traveling around the globe, literally around the globe, for his day job at Nielsen. I was either talking to him or emailing with him in what had to be a continuous stream of hours across the globe. To say that he spent 24/7 watching out and taking care of AAPOR would be a gross misstatement. He had AAPOR front and center of his mind every moment of every day these past 2 years. Now, it turns out that Michael has always been a highly efficient multitasker, and I have no better example to share than the image that Tina painted for me of Michael with a baby girl in his lap as he worked away at his master's thesis, and then a second baby girl in his lap as he trudged through his dissertation a few years later. I assume that Tina put her foot down on any more degrees because more degrees for Michael could have resulted in not just the BAM sisters, but the Bam Bam sisters. And yes, you should all be tweeting at Michael right now, pound girls, pound AAPOR. One last story that Tina shared. When Michael first started attending the AAPOR conferences, he would whisper in her ears and point out one giant in our field after another. Honey, that's Bob Groves. That's Don Dillman. That's Diane Colasanto. All AAPOR presidents and past presidents. And he told her he aspired to follow in their footsteps. I'm not sure that it has sunk in yet, Michael, but you are one of our giants. We have serious problems and challenges facing us in our industry, and we need serious people to solve those. And we are so lucky and so grateful that we have had you to lead us. With enormous respect and admiration for his leadership, his intelligence, his commitment, and his very good humor, I introduce you to your president, Michael Link.
You are awesome. Wow. I can always tell when my mom helps out with my introduction speech, you know? No, I am truly, truly blessed and very, very fortunate to be surrounded by so many fantastic people, both in my job and especially here at AAPOR and in my family, and particularly strong women. Working with Molly this year, I mean, fantastic. Incoming president, we are well served. Also several other people, my boss. My boss is here, Dee Sangita from Nielsen, and I want to thank her and other colleagues at Nielsen very much for giving me the time. It does take a little bit of time to do this job, the resources, the support that you have given AAPOR. Molly mentioned that my parents are here, Bob and Sharon. Thank you very much. And I know that they are here for at least one reason, which is to try to figure out what in the hell does my son do for a living, you know? Then, of course, you mentioned the Bam sisters. I just can't say enough about these fantastic ladies right here. Brittany, Alex, and Madison. You guys want to wave? There they are. And then, as Molly pointed out, to the one true love of my life for more than 27 years, my muse, the person that keeps me grounded, keeps me pushed, my lovely wife, Tina. Thank you. So a presidential speech is a tricky thing, right? So my 7th grade effective writing teacher, she reminded me a couple times this year, you know, dude, you've been a little shaky this year on that whole effective writing thing. So where to start, you know? So I was thinking, and then suddenly it hit me, the Crimean War, 1854, right? Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them. Sounds like AAPOR the last couple of weeks, doesn't it? Volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well. Into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. I mean, I just love that. Tennyson's Charge of the Light Brigade. It's funny because 10 years ago, we were down the road, 2005, at the Fontainebleau, and I was a discussant on a panel, and actually started using that quote. And at the time, it was a panel that was looking at the long-term implications of random digit dialing. And we were sitting there thinking, what if people actually gave up their landlines? Nobody would do that. That's just foolishness, right? And so at the time, I was thinking, man, a lot of people in RDD really felt like they were part of Tennyson's Light Brigade, really fighting the good fight in the face of insurmountable odds. Well, today there are a lot of those that might say the same thing about the whole of AAPOR. Are we riding boldly, but has our glory faded? I don't think so. Never before have there been so many opportunities, so many approaches, so many ways to learn about how people express themselves, their behaviors, their attitudes, their emotions, so many ways for us to measure those types of things. The opportunities for us as researchers at AAPOR is just fantastic. There has never been a better time to be in our field. Never a more challenging time, but never a better time to be in our field. As my good friend, past President Rob Santos noted last year, we're in the midst of a societal and global renaissance, one which tempers the way that we think about the world and the way the world thinks about us. And I would add to this that it offers us the opportunity to rethink how we view ourselves, both as individuals in our fields, as well as an association of great import across those many fields. And in rethinking how we view ourselves, we can define for the next generation a more fully realized AAPOR, one which continues to be guided by core principles, but projects a bolder mission with a broader set of membership than we've ever seen in our previous 7 decades. So let's think about the perplexing state of today's affairs. And I showed this when I was in India, and they became convinced Americans are indeed insane. All right? So I gotta ask, how many people see the duck? How many people see the rabbit? See, I love the radical rabbit people. Yes, indeed. 2 different ways we can look at the same thing, but see very, very different views. So I've had the good fortune, as Molly mentioned, of traveling both around the United States as well as globally in my role for Nielsen. And I speak to a wide array of professionals, students, those types of stuff. And I'm often asked a similar set of questions. And we can boil those down basically to, has there been a paradigm change in how we measure attitudes and behaviors. Now, a lot of you know Thomas Kuhn back in the 60s termed the coin paradigm change, paradigm shift, in his structure of scientific revolutions, where he described what happens when the current ways that we understand a phenomena give way to something new, sometimes something very radically different, a new approach that sometimes explains better these types of phenomena. So when people ask me that question, has there been a paradigm change? I look at them and I say, no. Why? Why no? Because I believe we're in the midst of the change. We're not through that change. And understanding that we're in the midst of the change is really, really important. This distinction is important both for understanding much of the confusion that engulfs the industry we have today, but also the opportunities that it presents us. It's interesting when we consider that Kuhn wrote, all crises begin with a blurring of the paradigm and a constant loosening of the rules of normal, what we might call traditional science. While survey methods have evolved greatly over time, we've moved from face-to-face to mail, from caddy to online types of things, what we've witnessed in the past decade is different. We have indeed, I think, started to see a true blurring of the paradigm in our industry. We've witnessed a shift in discussions from what's a good response rate to do response rates matter at all? We've seen talks about, what makes kind of a good probability sample to do probability samples really matter at all? We've really seen a true blurring of what's going on. And the notion of public opinion itself is also blurring. Is it the product of a design study? Is it the answer to a question? Is it a vote in the booth? Or do postings on Twitter, Facebook, videos on YouTube, as well as information from Fitbits, loyalty cards, GPS coordinates? Aren't those measures as well of public opinion, oftentimes reflecting emotions, attitudes, behaviors, the very types of things that we measure with surveys, but they do it in very, very different ways? If so, shouldn't we treat them as such? I think we've indeed seen a blurring of our traditional paradigm. Next stage, according to Kuhn, is a fielding crisis. As new theories arrive and approaches arise to try to supplant the now failing traditional methods. This crisis in our industry is an interesting one, however, in that the science of surveys really hasn't been proven wrong or incorrect, right? But it's really that society has changed. And our ability then to apply our methods isn't working the way it used to be, at least not without great effort, expense, or in some cases, major compromises in theory. When we look around, we see that there are many alternatives to traditional survey research on the rise. New innovative methods and tools for how we can measure opinions, attitudes, behaviors. And yet these also are not without their shortcomings, sometimes very severe. Non-probability samples have grown in use and in some cases shown some really major innovative improvements over time. And yet we still don't have some very basic rules for being able to assess when are we right in our assessment with these methods. But the same is true with our traditional methods more and more these days, right? When do we know that we're right with using any of these types of methods? Social media and other forms of big data are new potential sources of opinions and behaviors, and these are growing. We've got a lot of growing techniques in this particular area to drive insights. And yet currently, we're in an era where there's really no true science around this particular field. As Rob would have stated last year, we're in a state of many methods, but we don't see a clear normal science arising on the horizon just yet. So how will this play out? Well, Kuhn gives us, again, some direction on this and says that these crises often resolve themselves in one of three ways. First scenario, this normal science, the traditional way that we do things, evolves. We evolve and we're able then to actually solve the problems. For more than a decade now, we've witnessed the industry, and AAPOR has led in this particular area, wide ranges of different types of research programs and efforts in this particular area to try to find ways to take our traditional methodology and evolve it to fit the current society. Whether that's adding cell phones to samples, deploying address-based sampling, or using multi-modes. Such efforts have allowed us to, I think, extend the longevity of our traditional approaches. But let's be honest, they still haven't shown us a long-term solution, I don't think. The second scenario, second of the three, the problems that we face might be resistant to any traditional methods or even any new methodology. And hence, the problem is set aside for future generations to resolve. Let's think about it, though. We live in a time of information, particularly about how people think and behave. This is of utmost value across the board. Data-driven decisions in all walks of life, commerce, government, our daily lives, run on information about how people think, how they feel, how people behave. So setting aside our current problems and kind of waiting it out, that's just not going to happen. That's just not a viable solution. So the third approach that Kuhn mentions then, that there's an emergence of a new candidate paradigm, or what we might call a new normal science, in an ensuing battle over its acceptance. Now, we've seen a lot of battles playing out in our field lately, at conferences, in journals, sometimes with clients, even the occasional Bayesian blogger site. We have seen this. It would be hard to argue, however, that we've witnessed the emergence of a new paradigm. But it is this third scenario that I think that gives us the real opportunity. So rather than resist, why not lead in the development of this next paradigm? Rather than be the victims of paradigm change, let us become the architects of this new science. So how do we go about this? Well, the fact is, if I could give you the methodological answer, I wouldn't be here. I'd be on a boat out there. So I can't really tell you how the methodological battle evolution will play out. But I do think it's critical that we think about how can AAPOR play a role in this, in defining this new state. So this brings us to what Molly mentioned before, AAPOR 2025, leading over the next decade. So what will AAPOR be a decade from now? You think about looking back 10 years, what's it like to look forward? This may seem kind of crazy, really even naive to even think to try to do this type of thing. How can we possibly accurately project 10 years out in the future? Well, that's not our goal. Our goal isn't to project the future, it's to make the future. And that's what we really want to focus on. So last June, the Council and AAPOR, we launched AAPOR 2025, which is a decade-long initiative to help us drive where we want to go as an association. AAPOR 2025 provides guidance for the long-term strategic thinking of the association over the next decade. And consistent with our missions and goals, the vision reflects the views and opinions of a wide range of members and focuses on several critical areas. One, upholding our shared common values and member diversity across multiple different dimensions. Embracing new ways of conceptualizing and measuring opinions while maintaining our focus on scientific rigor and transparency. Serving members at all career stages through professional development and education, advocating and educating the public, news media, decision makers, and others on the importance of the quality measurement and the need to support organizations critical to our field. And last but not least, embracing a true global leadership role. So a lot of things going on at AAPOR 2025. I want to focus on three that I think are the key ones. One is our values. Two is our collective self-image. And last but not least, our global role. So let's think about values for a minute. I used to think of AAPOR as an organization that was kind of developed around the twin themes of methodology or understanding public opinion, the substance of public opinion. But I was wrong. It was at least superficial in those earlier views. It isn't a common interest in methodology or opinion expression that unites us, but something that really is deeper and much more fundamental. What binds us isn't the common view on methodology or commitment to understanding the substance and implications of public opinion. Rather, we are united by a common set of core values. And I've really come to believe strongly in this over the years, having become, like many folks here, you start off as kind of a passive member, just attending conferences, but over the years becoming far, far more involved in what we do. And as I've become more involved, I've experienced these values, I've seen them in action, and I've become convinced that it's the values that are going to continue to lead us forward. So while there's a number of different values that we might be able to ascribe to AAPOR members, several arose repeatedly in conversations we were talking to folks about AAPOR 2025. Members noted that there were certain attributes that served as our foundation, and these things should never change. They shouldn't change in 10 years, they shouldn't change beyond that. And these include four cornerstone values. First is integrity. Our members are dedicated to honesty, fairness, and accuracy, presenting the whole of an issue. And they're willing to see and discuss the positive and not so positive aspects of a particular issue, even if their own livelihoods are threatened by that discussion. The second area is rigor. AAPOR members are dedicated to systematic and scientific approach to investigating and understanding methods and insights. This comes through in the several hundred presentations we have at our annual conference, in the publications in our 3 refereed journals, and in the fantastic task force reports that our members produce. Third value, transparency. AAPOR members are leaders in the commitment to being open in what we do and how we do it, so that others can fully understand and potentially replicate our approaches and/or findings. The successful launch of the Transparency Initiative this year and all of the members who joined up this year really shows publicly the commitment that this organization has to that particular value. Last but not least, collegiality, our fourth cornerstone. The level of cooperation and interaction among AAPOR members is absolutely unparalleled compared to any other organization. Manifestly cleared in literally the thousands of hours each year that you all put into making this organization happen. Whether it's working on association activities, committees, task forces, continuing education, being involved with outreach, helping to organize the conference, and a host of other areas. Even the sometimes passionate debates that we have on AAPOR.net are also done within a collegial framework. Oh, I'm sorry. They made me put this in. Is it too soon? You guys were expecting buggy whips? Come on, man. We're not taking that horse out of the barn. But let me be serious on this. I had to have a little fun. Come on. Let me take a moment then and address the last couple of weeks, which I think is really fascinating and really shows how AAPOR comes together. There are a lot of recent discussions I think many of you on AAPOR.net have seen, and those of you that have logged out of AAPOR.net, you missed out. But a lot of things that went on AAPOR.net, there was a very serious debate and a lot of very well-reasoned folks talking about this issue in the code about the need or perceived need to provide the client's name, sponsor's name, to respondents. And as I mentioned before, a lot of well-reasoned and passionate arguments were made. And in reviewing these comments, it was clear that the language was at best unclear when you read it, or at worst could have put some of our members in jeopardy. Council recognized these arguments and agreed. Actually, we agreed fairly quickly with this and expedited a solution that followed the rules that we as an association have laid out for making such changes. Again, for those who haven't heard, the new code revisions were approved, and that code has a number of very important types of new components. We've expanded the sets of methodologies that the code covers now, and also focused a lot on some of the growing privacy concerns that are out there. Council did vote this past Wednesday, I hope you all saw the note, to temporarily suspend enforcement of that particular section that was in question and that members were concerned about. We do have an expedited review of the process going underway, and we are going to get additional member feedback, and assuming that there are changes that need to be made, all of you will get to vote on those changes as well. So while it might have appeared to be a fairly cumbersome process over the last couple of weeks, we felt that it really was important to stay within the governing framework that we as an association have laid out, and not to set the precedent of ignoring that framework, which could have caused our community a whole lot more problems. I think this actually is a good example of our values in action. Our values are important. Our commitment as an association goes beyond protecting these values to promoting them. The AAPOR Code of Professional Ethics and Practices serves as a cornerstone of our support for these values. But we also need to demonstrate them and promote them in all of our ongoing activities. Regardless of the methods we employ and beyond the specifics of the opinions and behaviors that we all individually study, AAPOR remains strong only if we continue to support and promote the fundamental core values that unite us. And it is these values that I think really will help to serve as a guide in helping to establish a new normal science within our industry. Next, second of the three, our self-image, our collective self-image. Who are we as an association? It's very interesting. I've seen a lot of people recently asking this question. We've seen it on Twitter, we've seen it in the hallways here. We're, as a group, as a robust, diverse community of professionals, who are we? Well, the tagline on our website says that we are, quote, the leading association of public opinion and survey research professionals. It's a bold and proud statement that has served us very, very well for years. But should it continue to guide us into the future? Like many of you, I share the belief that public opinion in its many, many forms should be held at a privileged status. It's the lifeblood of democracy. It's the cornerstone of business and commerce. It fuels decision-making, policy-making in all sectors of life. And let's face it, sometimes it's just fun to know some of this stuff. But I'll confess that it's been a number of years since I've thought of myself as a survey researcher, per se. More than 25 years ago, I began my journey, as Molly pointed out, in a university-based setting. I was well-trained in the traditional survey methods, primarily telephone methods, under Dr. Bob Oldendick at the University of South Carolina, or should I say, ASRO award-winning Dr. Bob Oldendick at the University of South Carolina. Later in my journey, it would take me to RTI, to the Centers for Disease Control, where I worked with a number of people on developing new types of ways of collecting information about behaviors, attitudes, and opinions. In 2007, when I came to Nielsen in the private sector, I began working with other scientists, engineers, to help develop new measurement techniques, such as utilizing apps on smartphones that incorporated short surveys, but with pictures, GPS, scanning types of capabilities. We've tested wearable metering technology to look at how people actually behave. We've experimented with incorporating big data types of sources as proxies or sometimes even replacements for traditional survey methodology. And I'm not alone in this evolution. When I look around this room, I see many, many of you that I know in your day jobs are doing the same thing, that you're both in the traditional world, but you're also looking at and starting to work with or been working with a number of these types of things, whether you're in commercial sector, contractor, academics, government, all of you are heavily involved in developing and testing these types of new methodologies. And again, many of these techniques are very, very different than the traditional approaches that we're used to. And at this conference, in fact, particularly with the mini conference component, we're actually seeing the results of some of those experiments. In a world in which we operate today, building ourselves in the association of survey researchers seems kind of narrow in focus. And in a world of tomorrow, I'm really concerned that it's just going to be inadequate. I was struck with something that Frank Newport said in his 2011 presidential address. There's a danger, he said, of spending so much time analyzing and reviewing the traditional survey sample approaches that our profession loses sight of the possible potential of many newly emerging approaches. To this, I would add that we as AAPOR need to be proactive, not just in sitting back and then assessing these methods as they're developed, but help to lead in the development of these particular methodologies. I think this is critical if we want to be leaders in defining the new paradigm. If we want others to perceive us differently, and I think that's a real condition if we want to really lead the industry and develop a new normal science, then we need to change our collective image as an organization. AAPOR 2025 recognizes that as an association, we need to move beyond reliance on traditional survey methods as the primary vehicle for collecting valid data. Let me be totally clear before all of you on Twitter start going, Link said no more surveys. This isn't a call to abandon surveys. It's a recognition, though, that surveys are going to become one part of a multi-method world. And that's what we need to really focus on. Further, in recognizing that there are so many new ways to express, engage opinions, and interpret public opinion, AAPOR needs to make itself the home to a broader array of new members and constituents, many of whom come from disciplines that may be very newly formed or have a very little history with our association. And I think this is particularly true when we consider the next generation of researchers who are far more likely to think of themselves as data scientists than they are as survey researchers. This change in self-identity as an association can't be one of slogans. It can't be one of just adding a few additional panels to our conference. It has to be part of our DNA. Third, our global responsibility. I think we need to think more on a global scale. A key attribute of the next decade, sure to color any paradigm, is the continued globalization of our field. Although our name may not reflect it, the American Association of Public Opinion Research actually reaches far beyond the United States, both in terms of membership, impact, and it continues to grow. Let me ask the question, how many folks here flew in from outside of the U.S.? All right. How many folks here work at a company where you do work outside of the United States? Yeah, that's what I thought. Interestingly enough, this is a map of where AAPOR members call home. Pretty wide-ranging. Nearly 10%, and a growing percent, of our membership lives outside of the United States. Places such as Japan, United Arab Emirates, Brazil, Denmark, Germany, and a dozen others. A growing percentage of the subscriptions to our flagship journal, Public Opinion Quarterly, guess where they're coming from? Emerging economies. That's the biggest place where we're seeing people wanting to get access to the information that AAPOR produces. Our Big Data Task Force report, which I think is just a real crown for all of us. We should be very proud of this. It has spread far and wide. Yes, indeed, I have become obsessed of late with seeing what AAPOR does on Twitter, for some reason. But if you follow that, it's just been fantastic to watch the big data report get passed on and on and on and on. In fact, several folks saw that there was a Russian translation they saw recently in Moscow. And what fascinates me is with something like Twitter, that this particular report has moved well beyond the survey, the market industry. It's deep into the data science community because it's one of the few reasoned studies that have tried to look at traditional methods and these new methods and try to make some sense out of them. AAPOR did that. That's the kind of power that AAPOR can have in our new world. Additionally, this year we teamed up with WAPOR and ESMAR to develop some modules that international journalists can use on public opinion polling, making the content that we've had for U.S. journalists relevant for an international audience. And next year, we will be in Austin, Texas, and we will be joined by our WAPOR friends, our sister organization with which we have had a long relationship. So what's interesting and fascinating to me is that we are a global organization. We have a global membership. We do a lot of global stuff. But rarely do we think of ourselves as a global organization. As mentioned before, these past few months, I've had the privilege of traveling literally around the world as part of my day job for Nielsen. And in doing so, I've met dozens of professors, professionals, and hundreds of students from Oxford, Dubai, Mumbai, Calcutta, Singapore, Shanghai, Mexico City, and Bogota. And it was a fascinating journey. And at many of these, we had a lot of great discussions about the field of measuring attitudes and opinions and behaviors. And as you might imagine, there are vast differences in the infrastructure and the development of science in these particular regions. Places like India and Colombia, they're struggling just to make sure they get the basics done, stuff that we've done for quite a long time. But they're hungry for that information. Singapore and Shanghai, they want to know how can they leverage their growing body of big data to understand people's attitudes and behaviors. However, all of these folks expressed a great interest in learning how to conduct all of this stuff in a sound and scientific manner. And that's the type of thing that we can bring to the table. What we as AAPOR do and what we represent is important, not just for those in the United States, but across the world. Moreover, having an international voice over the next decade, I think, is a responsibility of AAPOR as an industry leader. When we consider our core mission, it's one that fits very well within an international context. We proudly state on our website, and I quote, AAPOR members embrace the principles that public opinion research is essential to a healthy democracy, providing information critical to inform policymaking and giving voice to a nation's beliefs, attitudes, and desires. It promotes a better public understanding of this role, as well as sound and ethical judgment and the use of public opinion research. This is a type of mission that when I talk to folks in India, when I talk to them in Colombia, when I talk to them in Mexico, are very interested in being able to pick up themselves. These are principles that are shared by these opinion specialists and researchers globally. And yet many of them, particularly from emerging economies, struggle to obtain these. This is something that AAPOR can help them do. Yet while it's easy to change nations possessive to nations plural on our website, stepping beyond the borders of the United States to embrace a larger ongoing role in the research world is something that requires considerable thought and planning. AAPOR 2025 calls on us to collaborate globally with organizations that have a mutual interest in public opinion. We need to be proactive, ongoing partners within this international network of organizations dedicated to the pursuit and understanding and measurement of opinions. We need to use these collaborations to leverage opportunities to facilitate the advancement of knowledge, establish common best practices, and better serve our members and the broader global community. The time has come for AAPOR to take a more complete, coherent vision and strategy for embracing a larger international role and taking action to realize that strategy. And in doing this, we can help to ensure that this new paradigm that is developed is a global one. So let me close just by noting that I think this is an incredible time, as I mentioned before, to be working in the field of opinion research, broadly defined, and especially to be a member of such an important organization as AAPOR. We're in the midst of a critical shift in our industry, but it's one that gives us perhaps the greatest opportunity since our very founding. Make no mistake, there will be a new normal paradigm that emerges. The good news is that we're in a great position today to be able to help lead and define that paradigm. AAPOR 2025 calls explicitly on us to do so, setting the expectation that AAPOR will lead in the establishment of a new paradigm of measurement research that evaluates and promotes alternative designs and methodologies for generating insights into and drawing scientific conclusions about public opinion. Our challenge over the next decade is to turn a website vision into action. And I challenge all of us, as well as the AAPOR members who are going to come over the next decade, to help us make this vision a reality. Help us to pull together as an association a robust, diverse community that we are, and lead in developing this new paradigm. To do so is the one sure way that our organization can continue to serve as a vibrant home for the next generation of researchers, as it has for so many of us for the last 7 decades. I have been an AAPOR member proudly. This has been my home for 20 years. I plan, hopefully, to be here for another 20 years. It has been a true honor and privilege, folks. I want to thank you very much. Thanks.